And welcome to the weekly RV Life product training, RV Life Pro product training and Q&A. So a big part about that is the Q&A. So if you have questions about RV Life Pro, the RV Life GPS app, please ask those in the comment section, whether you're watching from our RV Life YouTube channel or the RV Life Facebook page. Your questions will be seen, and I can answer those as I have a regular agenda of a few items I'll cover. But by all means, if you've been holding out, today is the day to ask those questions. Um, Somebody asked me if I'm filming this from a prison, and because of my fake brick background, no, the green screen takes up a little bit too much overhead, and until we get a little bit of an internet upgrade, we're going to stick with the prison wall, and it's actually a little off center here today. So we'll go with that. Reminder to subscribe to the RV Life YouTube channel. This will alert you when I schedule broadcasts, when new videos come up, those types of things. And so subscribe to the RV Life YouTube channel, and again, leave your comments today. So we've got a couple of things to cover. I will jump right into that. Let me switch to my shared screen. There we go. So this trip, for regular viewers, will be somewhat familiar. This is that Mount Rushmore trip we've turned to a couple of times. So one of the things I just wanted to remind people that we have, and I checked with the dev team, this thing's been in here for 8 or 9 months or so. But if you're like me and you kind of get into habits and you forget to look at things, or maybe they don't matter until now, right? But I wanted to remind everybody about this check fuel prices feature that we have right here in TripWizard. Now, obviously, if I'm scheduling a trip 6 months in advance, like this is a December trip. No, this one isn't. Another one I'm working on. But if I'm working on a trip that I'm leaving for soon, I might be concerned, or certainly now, about fuel prices, and I might want to make some different decisions, right? If I'm scheduling something 6 months in advance, I might not yet be that concerned about that. But let me just show you an example of this little handy little feature. If we look at this trip, you can see I've got 3 fuel warnings. There's actually, there may be another one hiding under here. Now it looks like I've just got the 3 fuel warnings on this particular trip. And if we zoom in around here, all right, we're going to see our fuel warning. That was that triangle we have there, right here. And we've got various fuel stations around here. Now you can see from my filters that I pretty much have all fuel turned on and off. One click, boom. I typically will only use Pilot Flying J, but for the sake of this example, I want to go ahead and show you this feature. So if I'm looking at this trip and I'm thinking, you know what, I've got to get fuel there, but I'd really like to get the best price, right? If you're, 60, 80, 100 gallons, it can add up. So I'm going to zoom in here to where my fuel warning is, and I'm just going to right click kind of in an open space here, and we're going to see that check fuel prices right there on the screen. Now, if you're on a tablet, you like a touch, like an iPad or something, you have to hold for a little bit of a time to get this right menu to pop up. But otherwise, I'm going to right click my mouse and I'm going to click check fuel prices. And what you're going to see is it actually opens up a new window. And you can see here that I think I've got mine set. It either saved it from a cookie or it defaulted, I don't recall, to diesel, regular. And of course, you can see a variety of fuel stations. You'll see this kind of matches what our TripWizard screen looks like, right? As it should. And of course, down here, I can scroll through and I can see the pricing. And it starts out low to high. And I can see, not a huge amount of deviation here, but there is some. So if I was to just click on this first item, I can see, okay, that's way up here. That's, as you can see, within 15 miles. Well, I'm not going to go 15 miles out of my way, right? So let's come down here and try this one. And of course, now that is certainly within that realm of where I might be willing to pull over. So let's zoom in on this. And what's awesome is you can do all this right here inside this little tool. And now the question is, well, can I get my big rig in there? So I can switch to this satellite view and we can see, I mean, I see a semi truck right there. We can see this looks pretty broad, a fairly good in and out. And of course, I know their price because here it is, 5.06 effectively, right? And or it was the second one, same price, 5.07 actually, 5.069. So um, that's it. This is just a now. If I wanted to add this one, then I would go ahead and try to determine exactly which one that was. We see that's kind of the northernmost fuel stop here around New Franklin. So I could come in here without a doubt. There it is. There's the Casey's General Store. Now, again, here, depending on how much I'm going to save, it may or may not be worth pulling all the way over here. However, if I was going to stop and get a snack and do some other things, or needed some miscellaneous supply of some kind, a general store is not a bad place to do that. But it's just an example. Obviously, we could check all of these and whatnot. But this feature can be used anywhere. Obviously, if I look at my next fuel warning right here, and you'll notice the POIs disappear as I zoom out, right? And then as I get closer, they'll reappear. If they don't, I just click on that button right there, and here they are. Not a ton of stuff around here, so be worth checking. And here we're looking at a little bit of variation. This little M&L repair at 510 roughly, whereas we're jumping to the coffee cup fuel store in Jake's Corner here at 5.25. So 15 cents or so a gallon difference. So again, might be worth looking at, especially these days and as things change. Now, if I was not using diesel, let's just jump back to that. I can change to unleaded regular, plus, premium, whatever it is you're using in your vehicle. Just hit submit and it'll refresh. So anyway, that is a feature I just wanted to remind our customers about, our viewers, our users, everybody involved that is certainly contemplating the cost of fuel these days. Now let me jump over, and we do have a nice comment from Sue. How do you change your tentative trip? Okay, this is a great question, Sue. How do we change our trip status from tentative to active and things like that? And then while we're on it, why would we care? Why would we want to? So that's a great question, and I think I can leave that on the screen and show you here. Let's just make sure it doesn't get out of the way. So let's say I've got this Devil's Tower trip here, and remember, if it's an active trip, it's going to show up on my phone, on my mobile, my RV Life GPS and Campgrounds app. It's going to show up so I could navigate this trip. Um, an active trip also, if we go into our trip settings, will receive pre-departure emails. And so this is like the day before I leave or the day before I'm going to get somewhere, I'll get an email. Hey, I see you're going to Devil's Tower. Here's some interesting stuff to see. Here's the weather, yada, yada. So they're really neat emails that you get in advance of your different legs of your journey. So if I'm in a tentative trip status, as opposed to the active, which this trip is, then I'm not going to get pre-departure emails and it's not going to show up on my phone. Now, why would I want that? Oh, here's a great example. I'm going to change this. So let me just backtrack just a sec here to answer Sue's question directly. I open the trip. I'm interested in changing the status. I click on the wrench. I go to trip settings and I come down here to trip status and I can change it to active, tentative, or archived. Archived, real simply, are trips that I really never want to see again, but I don't want to lose the data. You know, hey, what was that campground we stayed in Albuquerque, or what was that restaurant we ate in? If I made a note or whatever, so stuff I don't want to lose, but I don't need to see every day. Tentative, and I can just click tentative and hit save, and now this trip is now a tentative trip as is labeled such. And of course, when I'm done with that trip or whatever I want to do with it, I can make it active or archived again. Why would I want to make something tentative? Well, if I have several iterations of a trip, or I'm building several trips, I don't really want all those clogging up my phone, right? If I go to this tentative menu here, you can see that I've been fiddling with this Denver trip. I've got at least 3 iterations there, and I've got all these tentative trips I'm planning, trips I've been thinking about. Some of these I probably need to move over to archive by now. But when I'm looking at my phone, I just want the stuff I'm dealing with so I can find my trip and go. I don't wanna have to wade through and accidentally open the wrong iteration of my trip, realize I'm going the wrong way or I'm going to the wrong campground because that was something I was planning, right? Um, I have them if we go back to my active trips, I actually have some of these Denver trips listed here now for demonstration purposes, so I can show them to you and I can see them on the phone if we need to do that. But otherwise, I would have these in tentative status. Um, so that is the way to change those from from active to tentative and archived, and then some of the reasons why you might want to do that. Um, And in fact, let's see, let's go to, let's talk about something else before we jump in. I was going to go to one of those Denver trips here in a moment, but Sue, I hope that answers your question. Again, if you guys have questions, let's have them. One of the things that comes up a lot, and we've talked about it, a particular slant of it here. One of the questions that comes up a lot is overfiltering. Now, we've talked about it here a little recently from the standpoint of mixing and matching filters that don't go together. We've talked about having uh, a, a KOA that's a national park and mixing some things that can't go together. We spent a decent amount of time talking about the park types and versus the brands and memberships, and you can't mix and match certain things. Like I said, I'm not going to find a KOA that's a state park, right? I'm not going to find a um, Thousand Trails, that's also a KOA, and some of those things that you get a little bit of different filtering there. If we look at some of this, a good example, Corps of Engineers, if I'm going to filter on this park type, um, I can't add in a bunch of stuff that they don't have. So let's talk about a little bit here just about over filtering. And the typical scenario we get is this the typical question we might get. And let me just go to Lookout Mountain here, show my entire trip is, hey, I can see that based on my radius here, I'm going to need to stop Hopkinsville, Cape Girardeau, something like that. As I zoom in, I got all these tent icons, right? And as I zoom in and I zoom in, the complaint is once I get to a certain point, all the campgrounds are gone. And we can see here that there's a boatload of campgrounds in this area. And so, but what happens if I add some filtering, right? So I'm going to zoom out just for the effect here. And I'm going to say, well, I only want a 5-star campground. Let's see, I got to zoom in a little bit more to apply filters. I want a 5-star campground and I won't try to do anything impossible. I'll just do some heavy filtering. I want pets and pull through and big rig and let's do full hookups and 50 amp and Wi-Fi and let's see what else have we got. We gotta have laundry and we gotta have firewood available. I mean, we got a boatload of filters. So you can see I have 9 filters applied if you look at the top up here. So now as I zoom in, there's nothing there, right? I mean, we saw, I don't know, 40 campgrounds in this space a moment ago, and now there's nothing. And that's because I just filtered myself right out of them. Um, obviously, a lot of these are excessive. Firewood available. We can lose that one. Um, One of the things we've talked about here before is big rig access and pull through sites. Take a minute to decide what you're really asking yourself. Do you need pull through sites for easy in and out for a one night stay? Or do you want big rig access for a luxury resort? Because a lot of luxury resorts have this gorgeous pagoda and gazebos and this patio and all this stuff, but it's a back end. It's not a pull through, right? So be careful you don't, again, over filter. So if we knock out pull throughs, we'll knock out. I tell you what's killing me here. I can guarantee you, as we continue to knock things out, it's going to be the 5 stars. The minute we take 5 stars away, suddenly we've got more campgrounds here. So even with this big rig, 50 amp, full hookup, Wi-Fi and pets allowed, now we can come out and we can come back in, and we're going to see a broader selection. Obviously, when you talk about things like full hookups and Wi-Fi, you're going to eliminate a lot of your state parks, Corps of Engineers, national parks, things that they just don't have that stuff in many cases. So here's a fairly refined list now in a fairly popular area of campgrounds that meet my criteria. Um, but this is something we see a lot of, and the idea is filter as you go. You know, if I start this out right here, let me just clear all my filters. And I say, okay, we need to stay in this area, right? Our trip dictates it. The amount of time I want to drive dictates this. But if I look at this list, I mean, it's overwhelming. And if I'm going to click on every one of these things and review them, that's a little overwhelming as well. Now, I'm not in a hurry. I could do it. I could also come over here and just look at the parks from this standpoint and actually see some of the offerings. But that doesn't, until I dive into each one, it doesn't tell me what I need to know. So, what is the bare minimum I need to have? So, with my, in the summer, I'm going to have 50 amp, right? Because I need to keep all the air conditioners running, and I'm an all electric coach. So, I need to be able to cook as well, right? So, for me, a deal breaker might be 50 amp. In the winter, I could get by with 30 amp. I could run almost anything, and for the one time in the evening, I might need to run the induction cooktop if I'm not cooking something over a fire or a grill outside, right? I could fire up the Jenny for a little bit and cook with that. But for now, we'll say it's summer and I need 50 amps. So right away, you see my selection diminishes. The other thing I have to have is big rig access. I don't have to have a pull through, but I do need big rig access. We can see a few more dropped off. And I'm carrying dogs, so I have to have pets allowed. Do I need full hookups? Do I need sewer, those types of things? I do not for a 1 or 2 night stay. And again, this all depends on your rig, your camper, whatever you're driving or pulling, what you can and can't get by without for a determinate amount of time. If I'm staying at this location a week, then yeah, I probably need some of those amenities. If it's an overnight stay, I probably don't. So here I've only got 3 filters applied, and now it's a little easier for me to decide where to stay. You know, I'm probably, if I'm on my way to a big destination, I'm probably not going to get off the freeway and head in here into the interior on one of these sites. So I can just start looking at the things that are right on my way. You know, that looks fine. That looks fine. That looks fine. And these are right on the route, right near where my driving radius says I should stop. And that's how I can choose a park there. So um, that's a little bit about filtering. And again, the thing we see often is that over filtering. It's just people getting too aggressive. You know, one of the things we can do here, and we've talked about this a little bit before. Let's say I want, and look at the jump. Watch the jump when I go to 4 stars. Boom, a bunch of them go away, right? Maybe I stick to 3 stars, and maybe if there's another amenity I have to have, let's say I have to have laundry. Okay, so now I've got 5 filters. Well, what if I get to an area and I say, well, I don't see any campgrounds in this area. I wonder if it's my filters causing a problem. Rather than go and turn on and off my filters like that, I can just come up here to the top and hit filters real quick, toggle filters on, toggle filters off, and it's a quick way to not have to monkey around with the filters too in depth. All right, I'm going to pause there and hit some questions. Um, Sue, you're welcome. Jamie's got a good question. Do only active trips load on the phone? Yes. So when you sign in to your mobile app, the RV Life GPS and campgrounds, it's part of the RV Life Pro subscriptions, not an extra fee for that. If you have the RV Life app and your active trips are not being shown, or it's asking you to pay again, you're not signed in correctly. Sign out, sign back in with the credentials that worked for RV Life Trip Wizard, and you'll see your active trips as well as it won't be asking you for more money. So yes, only active trips show up on the phone. Let's see what we've got here from Sue. Do you have a way to keep track of campgrounds you have booked while working on a big trip, so you know which one is booked? Yes, as a matter of fact, Sue, there is. And this is a handy dandy little thing. So, excuse me. So let's say I've got this, I'm working on this trip here, and I'm in the midst of planning or whatnot, but I've decided I have already made, let's say, this KOA reservation. I've made this one for whatever reason. I booked it already. Maybe even though I've got some planning to do, this one's booked, and I want to note that it's booked so I can see it at a glance. And all I have to do here is click on this pencil icon, and I can put a number. I can put anything I want in this reservation info. I can put a number. I can put the word booked. If I get an actual reservation number from the campground, I can put that in here. It literally makes no difference what I put in here. As long as something is in this field, I can hit save, and you can see now I have a little tiny calendar icon right here next to my number of nights. And that signifies I put something in the reservation field, which if I did that purposefully, I would assume that we put a reservation number. It could just be verbal, phone call or something along those lines. Maybe you didn't get a email, you didn't get a reservation number, you just talked to somebody and they said, all right, we got you booked, and you saw a charge on your card, but you never got an email from these people. So okay, fine, I'll just put verbal in there. It doesn't matter what you put in there. You can put the 10 commandments in there. It doesn't matter. It's going to show this little calendar icon, and that's an easy way to signify that you have a reservation. Let's take a look at Greg's question. If you download state maps to your phone before a trip and lose cell service, does Trip Wizard automatically access them, or do you have to do something to bring them up on the maps? No, Trip Wizard will automatically access them. Basically, the GPS. So what Greg's asking about is with the mobile app, and I'll be able to show that to you here. With the mobile app, you can download maps ahead of time while you're at home or while you're in the RV park to cut down on cell phone usage. Do it while you're on Wi-Fi. And so in this case, this trip here, this trip would cross however many states this trip crosses. I can download all of those on my phone ahead of time. And of course, my GPS chip in my phone is always working. Even if I lose cell signal, AKA data, internet, right? I still have a working GPS chip. And so the phone says, oh, I got a GPS chip that's trying to find a map. If I've downloaded those maps, it goes, okay, here's the map. Whereas if I don't download those maps, it says, I don't know where to go. I don't have a map to show you. I don't always download the maps. If I'm taking a short trip here, 2-3 hours away in the DFW area, I mean, I just know I'm not going to lose cell coverage short of a EMP hitting somewhere. I'm not going to lose cell coverage, so I don't have to download the map, right? Of course, I'm in Texas. I have Texas on my map, but I also don't want to download all 50 states. We'll just let it download the maps it needs. And that way it can find a map source even if you lose cell signal. And we'll bring up the phone and look at that in a few minutes. Let's see. Hey, Terry, what's up? South Colleyville, very good. Can you briefly explain the fuel warning? I have an RT, a Colorado trip. Okay. I don't understand which warnings are for which direction. Yeah, I actually have a great example to show you that, Terry. So I'm going to show you the fuel stuff here a little bit. I'm going to pull up a trip that I am working on. I think it's this one. And I'm probably, yeah, I'm going to make a copy of this trip so I don't goof it up while I'm talking to y'all. And we'll just call this live demo copy December. We won't get too fancy with that. And if I was really smart, I would make this tentative, but in case I want to show it on the phone later, I will. Okay, so there isn't always an easy way to show this if you've built this out with a return route. And one of the things I recommend doing here, Terry, is I'll build out my trip, or at least I'll try to build out my trip to the destination, at least maybe the first couple of fuel stops. But sometimes you just have to mathematically think it through a little bit. What I mean by that is this. You can see I've got fuel stops scattered about right here, right? I got one down here, 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 anywhere of these orange triangles. Now, I've got 100 gallons and I'm leaving. Let's change this to home. Make it a little clearer up here. You can see that I'm leaving with 95 gallons. I overrode the 100 gallons by default. It assumes I have a full tank, and I do, more or less. I got fuel, my last trip home, I got fuel about 40 miles out from the house at a pilot. And so at 8 miles a gallon, that's 5 gallons. And so I'm putting my starting fuel at 95. Okay. And you can do that with your fuel. If you're sitting in a campground half the summer and you've got half a tank of fuel, plug that in. It'll recalculate all the fuel stops. But you can see that, let's see, I recalculated my fuel. Let's make sure I did that right. 95. Yeah, so I'm starting with 95 gallons. So one of the things you have to kind of look at is knowing your rig a little bit and knowing your mileage. So it says I've got a fuel warning right here. Okay, well, let's see. If this campground is 355 miles away, let's go look at my, and just to come back to the question is not so much about the fuel warnings. If this was not a return trip, then and in fact I can do that right now. Let's just kill the return. We'll kill the last part of the return trip here, just to make this a little clearer. Okay, so now I've got a trip. And so I'm going to turn off the driving radius for a minute just to make this a little, make this a little easier to read. Okay, so now we can see with this trip, I've got a couple of fuel warnings. I've got one here, coming through here, and up here I've got one here. And that's it. Now, granted, if you look at my fuel capacity, I've got 100 gallons. I'm putting a reserve at 30, which leaves me 70 at 8 miles to the gallon is 560 miles, right? Yeah, 560 miles. If we wanted to make this to see some more fuel warnings, we could change this to say 60 gallons. And we're going to see a boatload of fuel warnings. So the idea behind the fuel warnings, of course, is that this tells me everywhere I need to refill. Now, interestingly enough, I told my starting fuel I still had 95 gallons, so it somehow it says, okay, we're good. If I was going to be realistic here, I'm good, 60 gallons. It figured it out for me. And there, that fuel warning has now moved where it should move. Sometimes you're dealing with a web browser. The refresh takes a second to essentially force it to refresh. So now you can see I've got a whole boatload of fuel warnings around here. And the idea is that every time I see a fuel warning, I need to add fuel and fill it. And when I do, it makes that one go away. We'll do one real quick, and then we'll circle back to the question. Um, we'll pick up a fuel a little far away. Okay, so here's my fuel warning. Let's just assume I'm going to get fuel before my warning, right? So we're going to add this pilot flying J to my trip. So after whistle stop right there, you can see there it is. However, my fuel warning has not gone away. Why? Because I haven't added the fuel. I'm going to come up to the flying J and I'm going to top off my fuel. Now that fuel warning has gone away and every other one is recalculated. And you can see there's plenty of them. Now the problem becomes when I add return, when I cross back over routes I've already taken. So in other words, if I add this hitching post to my trip, if I come to the same place on the way back, right? And then I come stay at the same campground coming this way. This is after a hitching post. I don't think I even added any nights. We better add a night there. Then, and let's turn off these fuel warnings. So what ends up happening is now I can get some overlapping fuel warnings on the way back. Let's see if we can force a refresh there. I'm just gonna force a little bit of a refresh here. Just to see if it'll redraw those trips for me, or those fuel stops for me. Okay, so as I come back down, so the idea is if I have fuel warnings along here, I have to be able to understand that those, here it is, right up under here. So this fuel warning is probably from one coming back the other way. And I don't know that there's an easy way to know this. However, if you are filling them as you go and then adding your return journey, it's a little easier to digest. For me, because my fuel capacity is so large, it's not that difficult to discern because I realize that certain distances, let's say we'll save that. Certain distances, if I've got a fuel warning 10 miles from my house, I know that's not for me leaving, it's something for me coming back, right? We'll go ahead and delete the fuel stop I created. And this will have to redraw a little bit here. But here's a great example. Obviously, I'm not running out of fuel between Snyder and Brownfield. One of these is on the return journey. And I don't know that there's an easy way to figure that out. I think we're going to look at possibly recoloring something down the road, but the simplest way is to build out your fuel and then build your home journey and build the fuel there. So a little bit of a convoluted way to try to explain that. I hope it wasn't more confusing than the actual question. Let's see what we've got here. Jamie's got a question. Assuming the stars are based on RV Life reviews alone, is it a good idea to vet further because it's possible that Campground X was reviewed by a small sample? So this is a great question, and here's why. Let's say I'm looking at a campground. Let me turn them back on. And we'll just pick something. Let's see, there's a bunch of them. I just picked the Amarillo area because I know there's a bunch of them there. The short answer is yes. So what Jamie's asking is, you know how if you've ever, everyone probably has shopped on Amazon, right? And you see something's got a 5-star review. Well, then you look and it's like 2 reviews. You're like, okay, well, one of them was the guy that invented it. The other was the guy that owns it. And, and after that, there's no other reviews. But when there's 10,000 of those 5-star reviews, you tend to trust it more. And so it's not much different with campgrounds. And one of the ways we can help you vet that a little bit is if I show the parks in this Amarillo area, which I'm doing now, and you can see as I move the mouse, each one of those little bobs, I can actually sort it by the number of reviews. So here's 874 reviews, 498, 217, 185. Most of the time, even in the 60s and 30s, I'm going to be pretty comfortable with that. About the only time you start to wonder, okay, 10 people. Interestingly enough, my inclination is not so much do I trust the two reviews. My first thought is, why are there only two reviews? Is this place even open anymore? We still show campgrounds that have closed to a certain extent, so people know we're not missing them. People say, well, there's a campground there, I stayed there last year. Yeah, you did, but it's closed now, or it's changed names, or whatever the case may be. COVID shut it down, who knows? But if we don't show it, then it gets reported as a missing campground, then we have to come back and say, no, 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 it's not missing, it closed. So sometimes we have information on that you don't have, but that's beside the point. But as I'm looking at this, my concern would be, why are there only two reviews here? And I would want to go further. So to Jamie's point, yes, I would want to click on it, and I'm going to go to their website, and I want to know more about this place. Okay, so it looks like not a terrible little stop. The website is fairly up to date. It could be very new. You can see it's not very big, but it could be real new. And maybe that's why it doesn't have a lot of traction yet. Um, and it might be, hey, this would be one to take a gamble on, or whatever the case may be. But yes, the idea is, do your extra research. One of the reasons we put all of this data in here, pictures, okay, features, reviews, Q&A, weather, all this stuff is in here, so you can do a more vetted review on the campground you're choosing. So I hope that helps. I agree with Sue. This program is amazing. And I really think we answered that. Let's look at Terry's question. Will fuel warnings disappear from the trip when you were on the return leg? They will disappear once you've satisfied the fuel requirement. So if we come back to this trip, turn off the campgrounds a minute, these won't disappear until I satisfy them by adding fuel. So in this case, let's go back here, change ourselves back to the 95 gallons. And now I know from experience, okay, this is correct. I know from experience taking this route that I almost always fill up right around here. And I'll go ahead and turn on fuel again. They're already on. Let's do a show. Oops, I got them off. Here we go. So I know from experience, I'll either fill up here near Vega, or I'll run it a little bit longer. Yep, Tucumcari. I can't say it half the time. Tucumcari. I filled up here probably 100 times, it feels like. And so now I make a decision. Do I fill up in Vega before I need fuel, or Tucumcari after I need fuel? I can look at this gauge, and this looks like 10 miles, looks like about half an inch. I know from experience that's about 30 miles. And yeah, I've got 30 gallons in reserve. Obviously with a motor home, you don't want to get below a quarter of a tank, but I know with that remaining 10 gallons, or 25, that remaining 5 gallons at 8 miles to gallons, 40 miles, I can still get to that fuel stop without running below a quarter of a tank. If something happened and I get to Tucumcari and the pilot's shut down for whatever reason, right? I can make it to Santa Rosa. I just might have to shut off my generator, which might be running my air conditioners, just so I don't run it dry, things like that. But in this case, once I add this fuel stop to my trip, Amarillo, I think that's where it was. Now I fill the tank, again, virtually top off my fuel. Now the fuel warning goes away and it recalculates with the full 100 gallons that I have less my reserve, which is 30. So I have 70 times 8 is 560 miles. We can see that my next fuel stop is right here. Now, this is a great example. This is well off the beaten path to some extent. I may not find a Pilot Flying J here. So let's see what we've got. I may choose to either switch to a different brand uh, of fuel stop or get fuel earlier because I'm not going to get it right here. Now, looking at this real quickly, there's like nothing around here. So what I'm going to do instead is we're just going to turn on all the fuel. And now I'm going to try to find a fuel stop that I'm comfortable with. So here's down in Mexican Hat. Let's take a look at what that looks like. I realize we got off on a little bit of a fuel diversion here, but we can see that there's a truck there. That looks like a good diesel stop. Let's just pop over there. One of my bay doors flew open at Mexican Hat, rounding a corner one day. I hadn't latched it properly. But we can see here is a good sized shell. There's plenty of egress in and out. It looks like the awning is probably tall enough. I can get another look at it this way. So it looks like I could get fuel here. Sometimes you can get right up and see the actual height of the awning. In this case, I can't, but it's obviously very tall. So I could get fuel here if I need to. This will be something I'll have to plan. We can see diesel looks like it's 509 right now. So that's what I would have to do in this case. And I kind of like just the regular map. So I could add this to my trip. And I'm not sleeping there, so I don't need to add the number of nights. And this is probably right about here, if I recall. So now if I fill my fuel tank there, looks like that's a shell now. So I'm just going to change the name and save. You can see that that fuel warning has gone away as well. And even though it's not the normal type of fuel station I would use, now this does bring into another conversation in that if I'm that low on fuel, let's say that's 70 gallons at $5 a gallon. Now I'm putting that on a different credit card instead of my fuel card. I may really want to consider topping off extra, even though I don't need it. But when I'm down here on the freeway on I-40, I would be far more inclined to top off at this Pilot instead. And let's see where that takes me. If I delete that shell and I go ahead and add my fuel here instead, this was after Route 66. And now we'll fill that tank. Okay, now we can see that I don't have that fuel warning here any longer. This is a dirt road warning. And of course, the dirt road is just this little bit right here turning into Monument Valley, into Goulding, so it's no big deal. But I can see that my next fuel warning, I don't know why I just hit show entire trip, is way up here near Grand Junction. And so I can plan on getting fuel in Grand Junction. Once again, we can just hit search for POIs. There you go. There's the Pilot there. So all of this fuel planning, as I build out that trip, it's going to remove those fuel warnings. And even at this point, if I stopped planning my fuel, I could add my return trip because I know those fuel warnings have already been dealt with. Those would be new fuel warnings. But these are the kind of decisions you make. Do I want to stick with my tried and true fuel stop versus taking a chance on somewhere I'm not familiar with, right? In this case, yeah, I'd much rather get fuel there and then I can get fuel somewhere else that I'm more familiar with. All right, let's go back and see where we are. Yeah, I think we talked about that. So, okay. And really a lot of what I just did was the next part of what I wanted to talk about today. So we've talked about the little fuel price checker by right clicking. We've talked about over filtering and how some of the nuance about that. We're also talk about finishing the trip. So we showed about when you have a reservation. So let's say if I look at this trip and let's say I've booked all of these sites already. I can go ahead and put my I'll put some reservation info here. I'm not even going to be picky, right? I'm just going to visually know that I've made reservations in all my stops on this journey. And I won't do the fuel until the campgrounds are booked. And the reason for that is if I have to go somewhere different for my campground stop, it's going to change my fuel usage. It may be 10 or 15 miles in off the freeway or something along those lines, or wherever it is. It may be somewhere completely different. It may turn out that we can't get anywhere near where we wanted to go, and now we're going somewhere else. But you can see I've got all these little guys booked. I'm just putting in a reservation note, and the last one I think is fine. So the idea is that I can come back at my trip and say, all right, step one, after setting my criteria of how fast I like to go, how far I want to drive, where I want to go, when I want to go, I've got my campgrounds booked, I've got a trip. And if I look at this trip, it's Christmas in Grand Junction, leaving the day after Christmas for East Denver, returning home over the course 21-day trip. And so now I add my fuel stops, which I have done. And you can see there's a little fuel warning that popped up, and we know that that fuel warning is, has to be on the way home because we took care of it going out already. So after I built out all my fuel stops, and look, I don't underestimate the power of knowing exactly when you're going to get fuel. We've talked about it repeatedly. Fuel anxiety is a big thing for new RVers. They don't always know where they're going to stop, and then when they do see a sign that hey, they can get fuel, it's sort of can I fit there when I get there, right? They underestimate the miles per gallon quite a bit. And you have to be realistic about what your miles per gallon are, and then they don't always know. With motorhomes, you can't get below a quarter of a tank. You can, but then you can't run your generator, you can't run your diesel heater, things like that. So you try to avoid getting that low. Particularly in today's times where fuel is not only expensive but potentially scarce, I might throw my reserve to 50 gallons or 40 gallons and rerun my fuel and stop more frequently so I never get too low, right? It's just one of those things I have to consider. Um, and I might do that. But once I've got my fuel stops, now I know the gaps in my drive for each day. I can think about rest areas, stocking up on groceries, that types of thing. A great example here would be going into Monument Valley. This place isn't flush with stores and things like that, right? So before I get off into some of this space out here where it's quite a bit more remote, I'm going to want to stock up on supplies. And what I might do there is do that here in Gallup before we get off I-40. And so I can come in here and let's turn on some, I don't have Costco. I don't have a Costco card, but we'll turn on Costco's and Sam's and Walmart and Camping World. We'll just turn some things on and refresh that. Not a ton of stuff here, but certainly there's a Walmart. So this Walmart in Gallup, I might want to stock up on what I need to get me through till my next big civilization area, which is Grand Junction. Now, granted, it's not that there's not stuff along the side of the road, right? You can pull into a truck stop and get an aspirin if you need it. But if I'm going to spend, 3 days in Monument Valley, potentially, I would rather be stocked up on things I need. So obviously I've got a Walmart here. I can add this to my trip. And this is after the pilot, I think. And there it is. And now as I'm looking at this, again, I want to prepare myself. And I can do that. I want to know what I'm getting into. Let's go to satellite view, see what this looks like. And as we would expect, it's off a main freeway. I've got plenty of semis over here in the parking lot. You can see here's probably an RV or two, these longer shapes. Um, Plenty of room. There's a ton of space out here. If I wanted to take the dogs out or something, I could pull up along the back of this parking lot. And I've got a little space here. If I wanted to come over to this side, I could kind of do the same thing. This looks like they're probably their garden center. There's a little bit of space over here. The idea is just knowing what I'm getting into, knowing I've got space, I've got room, and I can stock up on what I need to do and then hit the road and continue my journey. And so that's part of filling this out. Some of the other things we can do, let's go back to my standard view. Let's take a look at our trip again. And this is coming up the 191. You know, this area here, if I wanted to stop at a rest area, there may not, yeah, here we go. I might want to grab this rest area. Let's see, where is this? This will be on my way to Grand Junction. Let's say I want to add this rest stop to my trip. And that's right before Grand Junction, so it'll be after Goulding's. And once again, I want to do my due diligence here and make sure this is something I can get into, right? I guess I could have just left satellite view on. And as you can see, there's semis there. Looks like some of the facility, I don't know if it's any much more than a parking lot, but I don't need more than that with my rig, but I need a place I can get in safely, and it looks like this qualifies. So there's a little spot over here. I can even come down here to Street View. Let's just see what that looks like. All right, there's that big turnout. And there's the rest area. Okay, so small facilities here against some big rock. Hole in the rock. Yeah, I've seen this before. Obviously, been down this road a few times. So this looks fine. Again, I'm making sure I'm trying to take not the fun, but some of the mystery out of places I need to stop and go to, and I want to be prepared throughout this journey. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to add the whatever I need to. If there's a scenic place I want to see, I don't know if it'll show up here. Wilson Arch. Yeah, Wilson Arch right here. So this is right here on the 191 up near Moab. Yeah, it's booked as Moab, but it's actually a little bit farther south. There might be whatever here. There may be a we've talked about this before, but our search is very context aware. So if I'm in the Moab area and we decide we're going to pull over and find a brewery or something, Moab Brewery. There we go. Now I could add this to my trip, or I could just make a comment about it in my notes, whatever the case may be. But the idea is I'm going to plan everything ahead, get rid of those POIs, and we can see that that's on my way. After the rest area, we could stop there, stock up on whatever, right? Or just visit, have lunch, whatever the case may be. Obviously, we're not going to drink a bunch and then get back behind the RV. So maybe we just pick up something or have a sandwich, whatever, right? And continue on our way. So that's that. So let's talk about Greg's question here. All of what we've talked about so far is really just the planning part of it. And now I see, okay, this makes sense what Greg's asking. So when you let's go to let's go to the navigation piece. Let me go ahead and stop sharing this, and let me fire up the phone. Uh, and let's look at this trip from the mobile perspective. Let's share it now. Okay, so here is the, let me get rid of your question for a second, Greg, so we can see better. Here is the mobile app. Of course, I've logged in already. If I go to trips, you can see it's refreshing, rereading the trips. And I think the one we're using is, let's see, which one are we using? Yeah, here it is, live demo. So the fuel warnings are here. And it's not so much that they disappear, I just simply stop navigating to them. So in other words, when I leave home, my first stop is whistle stop. So I hit it, I match, and we always want to match your route exactly, okay? If you're going to plan it in Trip Wizard, then match it exactly. Don't allow changes to the route. It's going to present me with a route to whistle stop, and I'm going to hit start, and I'm going to go, okay? When I get to whistle stop, the next day I get up, I'm going to pull the app open again, and we're going to go to Hitch and Post. So I'm going to scroll down to Hitch and Post and hit go. And then the next day, and so on, so on. Now, when I leave Amarillo, or actually when I leave Hitch and Post, my first stop is Amarillo. And this is really just a, not a waypoint, but this is just a directional custom stop to get me up on 40 versus going through West Texas or New Mexico. And then when I hit Amarillo, I'm going to hit the pilot. I'm going to get to the pilot. When I get done fueling up, I'm going to tap on Route 66 and I'm going to go. None of these disappear from my route. I just simply press the correct one as I leave each stop. And so those fuel stops that'll be on the way back will be in order. And so, and I didn't finish building them out, but when I leave Grand, you know, that one we saw near Grand Junction, when I leave Grand Junction or when I arrive towards Grand Junction, I'm going to fill up. When I leave Grand Junction, I'm going to go to Denver or whatever, I'm going to fill up wherever I decided and added it to my trip. It's here. If I don't add it to my trip, it's not on my phone. That means here's that Cane Springs rest area we just added. The brewery we did not add, so it's not here. If I expect to stop there or be navigated there, it has to be added to my trip, and I follow it exactly. And that's how that should work. Um, and we said we would look at this a little bit more later. So the idea here, so these you can see right now, these were just my active trips. And you can see I've got a few in here. This is not unmanageable, but it's probably more than I would normally keep if I wasn't demonstrating, right? If you've got 30 or 40, 50 trips in here, it's real easy to just choose the wrong one, and it's just annoying to navigate through. But whatever the case may be, if I look at my actual trip here, or if we look at the Mount Rushmore Devil's Tower we were looking at before, if I was starting from Daytona Beach, here we go. I'd hit my stops. And of course, this one didn't have a whole lot in it yet. But this is, I would tap my destination and go, and it would build out my trip. I mean, it would follow my trip. You're still going to manually choose each destination. If I'm driving along, let me see if I can find the one we were at here. So let's say I'm booking along. Let me find this Cane Springs. So let's say I'm leaving Gouldings, and my next stop is Grand Junction, but of course I want to stop at the rest area, so that's what I'm going to choose. And let's say I don't know if it'll build the route from here correctly, but let's say I'm driving along and we get up near Canes, and I kind of look around, and depending on who you're traveling with, the wife, the kids, the dogs, or whatever, everybody's asleep. you're driving there, you kind of do a nope, don't need to go to the bathroom. You're like, yeah, we can make Grand Junction in 2 hours. I'm just going to skip the rest stop, right? And I'm just going to go straight on through if you decide that. Then you just need to stop the navigation and start with the next choice, which is Grand Junction. Um, it's not going to magically decide you didn't need to go to the bathroom, right? It's gonna, if you miss it, it's gonna say, hey, you missed your exit. You want to go back to that rest stop, you need to turn left or you need to make a U-turn. So you've got to at least tell it, hey, look, I decided not to go. So hit stop, restart the navigation, and move on to your next step. But the same with, some things you're not going to skip. And you're not going to skip your fuel stop. If you planned it all and it's in your itinerary, you're going to do it. Those of you that are pulling trailers and are staying at campgrounds for multiple days, you have the luxury of filling up your truck locally while leaving the trailer hooked up at the campsite. So you don't have to rely on adding adding fuel stops as rigidly, I think, as us motorhome folks do. So you have a little extra flexibility there. So I hope that helps and understands. As we said before, if the app is not showing your trips and you have active trips, and you have to have an active trip that has a route in it. In other words, I can't go create an active trip called Crater Lake, put my starting point, and then say, well, I'll finish it later. That thing's not going to show up in my active trips on my phone because there's no route, right? It's just a starting point. So you've got to have a route. It's got to be active, and then it'll show up in your phone. If you're not seeing your active trips, you're not signed in, or it's asking you for money, you're not signed in correctly. And it's that simple. Either it's timed out, maybe it's been a long time since you logged in, maybe you logged in with the wrong thing, whatever. Just sign out and sign back in. If you want to sign out, go to more, go to my profile, go to the bottom, hit sign out, turn right around, sign right back in. You should be good to go. That's that. So we'll see if I have any other mobile questions. We're good there. And we will stop and we'll go back to Trip Wizard. Okay. So that's our trip. I can close these little guys here. I may not have anything else, so that's going to be a last call. It's been an hour. If you've got any questions, now is the time to get them in. I'm looking at my notes over filtering. Just a one quick last comment about the filtering. We started sort of talking about this. If I turn on my campgrounds, I clear all my filters, and I say, well, I want to look for state parks and KOAs. See that? Now here's some state parks. Dead Horse Point and whatever this is right here, Green River. We can see on this page, I've got 3 state parks. Now these 2 are here because they are on my trip, okay? But from a filtering standpoint, I'm showing state parks. The minute I add KOAs to that, those 3 disappear. Why do they disappear? Because they're not state parks. I mean, it's not what I want to say. They can't be state parks and KOAs at the same time. And so that's why they disappear. That's one of the things we were talking about. That's not so much as over filtering as it is impossible filtering or incompatible filtering. We've talked about this before. Up here at the top, these are types, and you kind of select them broadly. Whereas down below, these are more brands and memberships, and you filter them sort of individually. If I want to see only KOA and Thousand Trails, that's what I'm going to see. And this is another great example here. I look at this and go, oh, I've got millions of campgrounds to choose from. Well, as I get closer and closer, it starts to apply those filters that I've created. And then suddenly it says, hey, you only wanted to see KOA and Thousand Trails. There you go. That's all you're getting. So again, we could talk about filters literally all day, I think. There's so much involved. It's very powerful. I've likened it to Amazon again, right? It's like you have Amazon, you got give me 4 stars, and if I'm looking for a TV, right, 60-inch smart TV, blah blah blah, and you got 50 selections, and then you say, well, but only show me Prime, and all of a sudden a bunch of them go away because they're not Prime or whatever the case may be. It's real similar here. Just use common sense when filtering and don't over filter, and you'll be fine. Okay, that's I put out the last call. Oh yeah, this is great. Yeah, Terry, the reason you missed this is because I didn't show it to anybody. I completely forgot. That was one of the reasons I wanted to go there. So let's do that. I appreciate you sticking with it and being diligent. Let's stop sharing this and actually share the app again. That was the thing I couldn't remember we wanted to cover. Okay, this is fantastic. So if we look back at the trip we were talking about, which is that live demo only, for whatever reason, I want to download this data to my phone ahead of time while I'm on Wi-Fi, not when I'm sitting behind the wheel. Okay. I want to have this data on my phone in case I lose cell signal, kind of like we talked about before. I'm going to hit download maps, and we're going to see that it chooses only the states my route touches. Okay. And you can see Texas down here is already on my device. Now, one of the beautiful things about this, we rarely talk about it. It doesn't only download the map data, it downloads all the campgrounds and reviews. Why would that matter? Well, if I was in the middle of wherever and suddenly there was a fire or traffic or something, right? Had a breakdown or something like that, and had to find a quick campground on the fly, and I was having spotty coverage, I would still have that data on my phone because we're giving you more than just the map data. You're actually getting all the other goodies as well. But I would hit continue and I would download this data. Now, I don't want to do it now because on the limited bandwidth I've got here, um, it would, I, I think it would probably cause some problems. So, but I would hit continue and it would tell me blah, 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 would download all that data. Now, once that data is downloaded, okay, don't be confused. If I download this data right now and I come here tomorrow and I pull up this trip, guess which big red button is still there? Yeah, you don't have to download a second time. If you forgot and if you did, you would tap that button and every one of these would say already on device. You go, oh yeah, I already did that, right? Um, maybe later. Uh, so the button doesn't go away once, even though you've downloaded it. Just know that you downloaded it. You can double check it if you want, but it's there. If you want to further delve into that a little bit, or you wanted to manually download some things by yourself a different way, we could always just go to more, go to offline storage. You can see this number 2 means I've got 2 updates, but I can look at my USA and we're going to be able to see that all of these are downloadable states. So I can manually download any of these I wanted. And you're going to see, of course, that I have Texas already downloaded. You can see the difference in the way those icons look. So if I also could tap on that and I could refresh it, I could even remove it. You know, if you're a little bit tight on space and you want to remove some stuff you don't need right now, you can do that. Or in this case, if I wanted to refresh Texas manually, I've got some updates. I don't want to tap on that because I don't want to start a download right this minute. So that's where the data actually is, and you don't need to do anything to invoke that data. It works when it needs to. Before all you Android users ask, no, you can't yet download those to a separate SD card, but that is being looked at, best I can tell you. Um, Obviously, with the amount of data is not huge, and if you just grab the states you need for your trip, virtually anybody with a phone, it's the age of your phone and the amount of storage is sort of commensurate with, if you can run this app, your phone probably has enough space to download a few states for your trip. If the phone is old enough that space is a concern, the phone's probably too old to run the app successfully anyway. I mean, I'm just thinking sort of hand in hand, trying to resurrect my IT background from days gone by. So hopefully, Terry, that explains it. Again, I recommend after creating a trip, I recommend you just test that out. Download the data, even start the navigation. Make sure it works. One of the things, and I'll show you this while we're talking about it, some of these things only work when you're in the middle of navigation. So let me start this navigation real quick. And one of the things you're going to want to make sure is that the thing's going to talk to you, right? And when I hit start, it's not until I actually start navigation that I get some of these options. And here we are, map options, route preferences, speed limit warnings, north up, speed alerts, voice navigation, you know, um, and my voice volume is loud. And I've got a diesel pusher, but anybody with a V10 up front, you need that on loud and then some, right? Um, but there's times where people turn something off or forget, especially if you do it during navigation. And then you go, where the heck was that set? You can never find it again. It's because you don't see it until you're in the middle of navigation. Here's the details, here's the route, etc. So we'll stop that. But that is an important point to note. And then, of course, again, if I download that, you can see it. Texas is already on. So I think that's about all I really wanted to talk about on that particular note. You can see those places that I made those little reservation markers are. You can see it, reservation info. So this is really cool. Is if you're booking along and you need to look at some data or comments or something, you can just pop that open and there's that information. So okay, I think that's about all I got there. Anne says thank you, Anne, for showing up today. That's about all I have, so we'll call that a week and we'll do it again next week. If you have questions, think about them and bring them next time. Greg, always a pleasure to have you back on. Jamie, cheers. I'll talk to you later. Sue, thank you. Anne, thank you. Did I miss anybody? Terry, good questions today. So, okay, that's a wrap. We'll everybody have a great week, and we'll talk to you next Wednesday at 11 Central. Be sure and subscribe to the RV Life YouTube channel, and you'll be alerted of that. Thanks. Bye.